planetary is what saved the monster truck business completely. Without the planetary, we couldn't run these trucks.
Back at the build, Roy and his crew are running into a major glitch installing one of the planetary gears on their Bigfoot 16. No matter how they adjust it, it just won't align properly with the axle.
You want me to try to turn the pinion, or you think you're there?
No, we're not even there yet. Won't push it at all.
No, it's just sliding back.
Ordinarily, if they had a defective part, they could reorder it. But this build has a hard deadline, the four-wheel jamboree in just 6 weeks. They can't afford to lose a day. They get back to basics and resort to a crowbar. It sets things right.
That one's stubborn.
With the chassis built and the axles and planetary gears in place, the build is back on track. But the preparation for the race is far from over. Next, they need to work on the technologies that allow monster trucks to make bone-crushing landings, the suspension system.
These are the shocks.
When the wheels travel over bumps in the road or lose contact with the ground, the suspension is the mechanism that steadies the vehicle and dampens the vibrations.
If you didn't have a sufficient amount of damping, the vehicle would be bouncing on the wheels, and it would be very difficult for the driver to regain control of the vehicle quickly.
In early monster trucks, the dampening was done by thin, stacked metal layers that bent to absorb impact, called leaf springs.
They attach to the axles, the U-bolts right here, and the body sits on top. The body will move up and down by the amount of leaf springs you have and what kind of bumps you hit, basically.
But leaf springs lack dampening power to handle monster trucks catching air and colliding with the ground.
This thing would hit, your tires would compress and bounce you 6 feet back off the ground. We would bounce around so much we couldn't keep our feet on the pedals.
The vehicles and the drivers had reached their breaking point.
We were doing so much with the trucks, hurting drivers, we felt we had to make a change.
In 1988, monster truck builders started experimenting with a whole new type of suspension system. Front and rear shocks made up of hollow cylinders filled with compressed nitrogen gas.
Okay, this is the shock absorbers. This is what actually makes the suspension work.
These paired cylinders are joined at the top with a small tube. The piston is pushed up inside the cylinder. Oil is displaced and flows into the adjacent cylinder.
The oil comes through this side, down into this chamber, and this is the nitrogen chamber.
It's here that the displaced oil pushes down against the reservoir of nitrogen gas, 400 pounds of it.
And as the oil pushes the nitrogen puck down, it's compressing the nitrogen. This is the cushion of the shock.
Nitrogen shocks allow monster trucks an unbeatable resistance to the impact of racing on rugged terrain and landing skyscraping jumps. They're 6 times more powerful than the first monster truck suspension systems.
It's all about shock absorption. If you can absorb a major impact, you're not going to bend parts, you're not going to break wheels off, you're going to land it.
In Smyrna, Tennessee, in September 1999, Bigfoot driver Dan Runte tested the limits of nitrogen shock technology.
We'd never done anything like that before. We'd done long jumps, but to put something of that magnitude out there and you know, jump over it was just a totally different deal. I mean, people were looking at us like, you're crazy, it ain't gonna work.
To clear the top of the 14-foot-high 727 airplane, Dan knew he had to build up enough speed and hit the ramp just right. But the more speed, the harder the landing.
We were back 300 foot from the ramp, and it was a 4-foot by 12-foot ramp. I hit it as hard as the truck would go. I hit the ramp just shy of 7. But I looked down and seen the tail section down there. That's when I realized we might be going just a little fast for this one.
The super speed allows Dan to clear the top of the plane with room to spare. But can the shocks take the pressure of the landing?
Oh, right.
Wow.
It looks like it's right here. 202 feet. 202 feet.
Yeah.
We got a new record here, Alan, 202 feet. Furthest we have ever jumped a monster truck. So definitely, we need Guinness out here.
We jumped 202 foot. We bounced another 100 on the first bounce. Somewhere between 30 and 35 foot of air underneath the tires at the highest point. You know, and it was a rough landing. I mean, I bruised my inside because of the hit we took.
The landing would have been flat out impossible without nitrogen shocks. Next up, the surprising secret behind the monster truck's fierce 1,500 horsepower engine that makes lightning speed possible. At Bigfoot 4x4, Bigfoot 16 is taking shape with a chassis, axles, and a nitrogen-charged suspension system. But it's far from race-worthy, and the Vermont finals are in just 5 weeks. When Bigfoot 16 hits the track, the engine could be the difference between the validation of victory or the humiliation of defeat.
When we first started racing it, the 250-foot course was 7.5, 8 seconds would be a competitive pass. Now a competitive pass in 250 feet is about 4.8 seconds.
Early monster truck engines only generated about 700 horsepower. And at any time, they could stall out and leave a driver stranded on the track. The problem was the mechanism that feeds the engine fuel, the carburetor.
So as the trucks jostle around, the fuel is sloshing around in the bowls and stuff. So the truck is dying in the air.
Traditional carburetors relied on gravity to get fuel into the engine. But monster trucks defied gravity. On the way down from a jump, the fuel was drawn away from the passage that feeds the engine.
So that's when we decided that we have to go with the positive fuel system, which is fuel injection.
In a fuel injection system, the injector pump forced fuel directly into the intake manifold, where it mixed with air, then on to the combustion chamber. The system constantly fed the engine fuel, even when the truck was soaring through the air.
Whether you're on your side, on your top, or wherever, when you hit the accelerator, you have instant RPM.
It just ran so much better over the obstacles. It didn't cut out. It was a lot more stable engine, so everybody started to inject their engines. Well, that raised the horsepower.
But fuel injection was just part of the monster truck engine story. Fuel-injected trucks could still only generate about 1,000 horsepower. Drivers going after the win sought another upgrade to give them the edge. The focus turned to fuel. Gasoline has a high burning temperature that limits the horsepower and puts the engine in danger of overheating.
We burn gasoline, we can't run them as long as we want. They build way too much heat.
But alcohol burns at a much cooler temperature and yields more power than gas. Monster truck owners decided to switch to methanol fuel.
Methanol is a cooler burning fuel, and you can get 20% more horsepower by just switching to methanol from gasoline.
Today, methanol is the industry standard for monster trucks. But there's one drawback. In comparison to gasoline, you need twice as much methanol to get the same amount of energy.
The motor can burn upwards of 6 to 7 gallons of fuel in a 300-foot race. These things can eat some serious fuel if you let them.
Fuel-injected methanol-powered engines make 1,500 horsepower a monster truck reality. That's almost twice as powerful as a Formula One race car and 7 times as powerful as a standard pickup.
To take something from a dead start to, to 60 mile an hour or 50 mile an hour, that's pretty impressive, especially something that weighs 10,000 pounds. That's pretty cool.
But it takes more than horsepower to win a race. With the engine in place, the team has 4 weeks of build time left. They still have to install the seat, body, and tires. Now they move on to one of the most critical steps, the transmission.
Okay, this one's a 3-speed transmission. So if we're outdoors and you need some RPMs for a long track, we can gear up there a little bit and use all 3 gears in the transmission.
The transmission is one part that was modified for the very first monster truck. From the beginning, monster trucks were equipped with a manual transmission specially designed to work without a clutch. To this day, the transmission allows monster truck drivers to shift gears at lightning speed, up to 3 times a second. It's an upgrade they can't do without.
We shift them so fast, it's just that quick. I mean, it's because in a matter of 30, 40 feet, we're in 3rd gear already when we're going down the tracks. So, I mean, you've got to be able to shift them. You've got to be able to shift them quick.
With the axles, engine, and transmission all in place, it's time to move on to the front and rear steering systems. Before rear steering was made standard in monster trucks in the late 70s, they were ungainly and unpredictable.
The monster trucks are so big that just maneuverability, get them out of your trailers, into these small buildings that you perform in. Trucks have to be somewhat a little contortionist.
With rear-wheel steering, it's a whole new world. In most vehicles, the back wheels are in a fixed position. In a monster truck with rear steering, the back wheels are capable of turning independently of the front wheels. In a turn, the rear wheels are set in the opposite direction as the front wheels, dramatically reducing the turning radius of the truck. Here's how rear steering is set up. Hydraulic hoses lead to the rear axle, but the control itself is a simple toggle switch.
Here we have the switch for the rear steering. The driver can put his hand on the shifter and operate the transmission and steer the rear end at the same time.
As monster truck drivers begin a turn, they flick the switch left or right to set the direction of the back wheels. After the turn, the wheels will straighten out automatically.
But you gotta have rear steering. If you didn't have the rear steering, it'd almost be like driving a train or something. You know, you'd have to make big swings.
Next, how do you stop an out-of-control monster truck when the driver is unconscious? It's as simple as pressing a button. Roy Hooser and his team are 8 weeks into the monster truck build. In 2 weeks, Bigfoot 16 will go head-to-head with the toughest trucks in the country, in front of thousands of fans. Still to come, the fiberglass body and tires. But right now, the focus is on safety. It's time to install the seat and the harness.
Monster trucks, by their design, are intended to fly. Once it leaves the ground, gravity takes over, and that can be a big situation for monster truck drivers.
For a monster truck driver, torn muscles, burns, and broken bones were just part of a regular day at the office.
It used to be like being in a car wreck 3 times a week for a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday show. I had 2 shoulder operations since from those years back then. I've always taken that compression hit when I hit cars. When I would take a hit, my arm would immediately go numb. It would go dead for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It finally dawned on me that I had to stop doing this.
Rollovers, collisions, unpredictable fire. Together, they made monster truck racing a treacherous sport. Bob Chandler decided big changes were in order.
We don't mind hurting the trucks, we don't like to hurt our drivers. Bob said, okay, that's it. We're not racing, we're not doing anything heavy until we figure out what to do about the people.
His first move was to create the Monster Truck Racing Association, an organization that mandated safety measures for every monster truck in competition.
The MTRA's biggest goal is to make sure that every monster truck that runs is safety certified.
One piece of equipment required for certification is the 5-point harness, like the ones used by NASCAR drivers.